This is Hart Hagen with Truth to Power on WFMP 106.5 FM, Louisville. And I'm here with Elizabeth Werkmeister Shafer. And we've been talking about the Bullitt County pipeline, or I'm calling it the Jim Beam pipeline. And I got a call from Elizabeth the other day, and she told me that she's got sinkholes on her farm as a result of the drilling that LG&E is doing. But first, Elizabeth, how's your day going? I'm really glad to have you.
It is going really good. I've been cutting grass today out in the field and just going over the property and looking to see what's going on.
So you have a Christmas tree farm, right?
Yes.
How big is your Christmas tree farm?
It is 7.6 acres. This will be our 32nd year selling. This was my parents' farm, and I've kind of taken over it to continue my parents' legacy. Right,
great. So what kind of Christmas trees do you have?
This year I planted Canaan fir or Canaan fir, concolor fir, and some white spruces. And I also have Serbian spruce and some white pines and some Norway spruces.
So this is a family business that your parents started? And
yes. So they started it in 1985 when we used to have cattle and horses and chickens and ducks and geese and stuff. And then my brother went away to college, and he was supposed to come home to help my dad unload hay. And when he didn't show up, then my dad said, "This is for the birds. I'm getting too old to do this." So he sold all the cattle, and they started planting Christmas trees.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the sinkholes.
Where I live, farm on either side of me has underground springs. And so, the property's been around. It's been in our family since 1973. And all of a sudden, I've had sinkholes that started popping up shortly after they started drilling in December. I noticed I had a few that popped up that weren't too big. They're 9 or 10 inches deep, and they run about the width of my lawnmower. They were growing because I had to start being real careful when I went over them with my lawnmower to make sure I didn't get stuck. And then after the rain that we had on Easter, I noticed a huge sinkhole that's roughly 33 inches deep and about 33 inches wide. And then in some areas, underground, there's like 9 inches of topsoil, and then it's hollow underneath. So if I run any type of equipment over top of it, it'll sink even further. And what I've been told is it'll turn over my tractor.
So you've been noticing the sinkholes, and you have, and there's more and more of them. How many are we talking about?
In one little area, I have 5. And when I was walking over the area today, when I was talking to my neighbor, the ground around that area is starting to get super soft, where you actually sink when you walk on it. So I'm worried that this thing is going to open up and it's going to be 8 or 9 feet wide, because from the beginning, from one to the end of the other one, it's about 8 or 9 feet. From the start of one.
Do you know that it's there? Do you always know that it's there, or can they cave in on you?
They can just pop up. This was the property that I grew up on, so I'm familiar with it and have been around it for 45 years that I remember, and we've never had this issue. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they start doing some drilling, and then I start getting these little things that pop up that are 9 inches deep, that some of them are 3 feet wide. And then the huge one was just, oh my goodness, what is this? And then I went, so it's land that I'm familiar with, and that we've never had this problem in over 40 years.
Right. So do you know where they're drilling?
They are drilling about a quarter mile away from me. Probably not even that. It's the farm that's next to me. There's a family that owns part of the property that used to be part of the farm. And I was talking to them this afternoon. You have the fence road conversations. And she said that there's probably 15 that have popped up in the field over on the farm that they actually did the drilling. she had no idea that they were even drilling over there. She just noticed that all of a sudden these things started popping up from the winter to the spring.
What kind of farms do they have, and how much acreage are we talking about?
The Jackson farm, which is actually where they did the drilling, and the pipeline, is a 124-acre farm. The people that I were talking to own like a quarter acre, but they would go over and walk in the fields. They usually plant soybeans. They lease it out, but because it's for sale, they can't lease it out. So nobody's farming on it right now, which is probably a good thing with the sinkholes developing, because if you get that heavy equipment out there, who knows what will happen.
It seems to me like with this going on, it deprives you of the value of your property, you know?
Yeah, and they're moving closer to my house, which is very, very concerning. And, you know, I'm scared to, that's a field that my side yard is a field that I planted in. Well, now I don't feel comfortable planting over there. And then I also have to be careful, because when we are open for business, I do have people walking through there, because I have trees that are for sale. So now I have to caution tape off areas because I'm concerned, you know, even though we're covered with no liability because it's a farm, it's an agritourism, I still don't want somebody hurt on my property.
Right.
And little kids, you know, that could take that hose deep enough that, you know, they could get out, but it would really scare a toddler.
Right.
Walking around.
Do you know who's doing the drilling?
LG&E was doing supposedly some core samples just to see what the ground was like, but they're only putting the pipeline in 3 foot deep, and these holes were over 300 foot deep.
Right. How do you know the holes were 300 foot deep? Did LG&E say that, or what?
No, it's just going from people who are doing investigations, finding out what they're doing in the property. You could tell by the amount of equipment that they had up there that they weren't just 3 foot deep. They were actually like, well, the drills that they used to dig a well.
So like you're saying, these are underground pipelines. They're going to build them like 3 to 6 feet deep. And there's no reason for you to drill a 300-foot hole if you're just surveying. So LG&E or their contractors or whoever is doing this, they're trying to get you to think that, oh, we're just surveying so we can prepare for the construction of the pipeline. But you know, that's not, you don't drill 300 feet deep because you're surveying.
No, and with the ground that we're on, the underground springs, you know, all of Kentucky is built on caves. You know, there's cave systems that run under the entire state. So anytime that you mess with something or do drilling or do anything that messes with the structure of even, you know, 50 feet deep, probably even 10 feet deep, you're messing with that entire line. Because I have some friends that have told me that they have some sinkholes that have popped up on their property that they can actually hear water running underneath them. So I'm worried about the environmental impact that is going to happen, because we have a lot of creeks that run through here, and, you know, it's fresh water. There are people that are still on wells out here. I'm fortunate that I'm on city water, but I do use cistern water for my plantings because the city water would kill them.
Right.
So I'm scared of what's going to happen when they really start getting in there, and if they do any type of blasting, because we are on rock.
Right. They're just getting started.
Yeah.
So when for our listeners, I'm just starting to kind of figure this out myself, but you know, when you drill a hole, it's like 300 feet deep, then you're drilling through underground streams. And
Right.
when you drill through an underground stream, you puncture that underground stream, and then the water from that stream can all of a sudden start to rise toward the surface. When the water rises toward the surface, it starts to wash out the dirt and the rock and the sand, and it's just so the ground underneath you just starts to disappear, and that's where sinkholes come from.
The other thing is when they drill through it and punch all the way through where the water is, it can also wash out what's underneath it too. So it's not just the water coming up to the surface it's also, you know, you're in the deep areas of the ground where things move and that type of stuff, and anything. You know, we had an earthquake here probably 10 years ago, probably about 10 years ago, there was an earthquake
Mm-hmm.
that we could feel. And that was pretty scary. But when you're talking about, you know, the earth's constantly moving, and then your man's going through and punching holes through things that haven't been disturbed for however long, things are going to happen.
Yeah. So do you know how much drilling they want to do?
I don't know. I know they drilled 12 core samples around in this area that, and some of them had some natural gas in it, so that gas was exposed to our environment. A couple of people have lost their beehives, whether it's coincidence or not. Everything just kind of all happened around the same time.
Mm-hmm. So people lost their beehives. What else have you seen in terms of the impact of the drilling?
You can, I have more animals here than what I've ever seen before. And, you know, when you start disrupting areas where animals live, they're going to move someplace else. And I've had more rabbits and squirrels and chipmunks and groundhogs than I've ever had on the property.
Right.
So, and there's a thicket that's, the front part of my farm butts up against a thicket. And, you know, that thicket has an underground spring. So, you know, if the animals are moving out of the thicket to move to find other places, it's kind of scary. You know,
Right.
what else is happening with the environment?
Right. So what could be happening with the environment? What are the different kinds of things that you're concerned about?
The groundwater being contaminated, which, you know, feeds some natural streams, feeds Salt River. A lot of people do have drinking water out of it in their wells. The fact that it's going to throw off the ecosystem, the animals are not going to want to stay where it's the upheaval's happening. They tend to move and migrate, so they're going to move into other areas, which could be anywhere around. So, and you have the loss of life with animals because they don't know what is going to happen.
I mean, they can only move so far. You know, they'll move and then they'll live for a while, but there's not enough food or shelter for them, so they just die or they fail to reproduce.
Right.
You know?
And when you look at food, you know, there's a thicket next to me, but with the animals moving, I'm losing, the rabbits will chew off the tops of my trees.
Yeah.
So then that's a loss of a tree that, you know, I put in the ground and hope in 9 years, you know, so I've already lost several trees from deer and rabbits chewing on them that I had planted last year.
Right.
So
And when you think about it, they haven't even started to build the pipeline yet. So what they want to do, they want to build the pipeline and they want to frack. So fracking is hydraulic fracturing, where you're drilling. It's a technology that's been around for about 15 years. And so you drill into the ground, you pump water into the ground. The water is treated with chemicals. What chemicals are in the water is unknown because those are thought to be corporate secrets. And so you pump just huge amounts of water into the ground, you explode it, and then that releases a bunch of oil and natural gas, which you then suck out of the well. And so what could go wrong? You know, you have a bunch of wastewater that you have to store. But in the meantime, you know, you drill down, you pump water into the ground, you explode it, then that is, it's devastating to the karst, to the underground water. It just destroys what's underneath the ground. So that's fracking. And then pipelines, you know, it's not a question of whether a pipeline is going to leak, it's when.
right.
So.
And, you know, if we were able to have any benefit from it, it may be a different thing. But we have no way to access it.
Right.
The other thing is fire hydrants are few and far in between out here. So if something was to happen, far be it for, you know, the fire department to get out here to even have water to put it out.
Right. So you're building out all this infrastructure for a corporation. And this pipeline, they want to build this pipeline for one corporation, and that's Jim Beam. Jim Beam wants a pipeline to be built, but they don't want to pay for it. It's a $20 24 to $27 million pipeline. They don't want to pay for it. Meanwhile, people don't have fire protection because there's not enough water pressure to be able to, to pump enough water for your fire protection. So instead of building infrastructure for people and the people that are already there, they're building stuff for corporate profits.
Right. And, a lot of people think, well, Jim Beam's a U.S. company. Jim Beam isn't owned by the Beam family anymore. I don't think, because the Beam family's from this area, that they would ever do this to their community. This is from an international corporation that's based out of Japan. Mm-hmm. They don't care.
Right.
This isn't their home. This isn't where their families were. This isn't where, this isn't, their employees live here, but it's not people that they've grown up with.
Yeah, they want you and all of us, they want us to be a sacrifice zone. They want to sacrifice the farmland, the water, our health, and even our economy for their corporate profits.
Right. And, when you look at just the environmental impact, when you have farmers that can't use their farmland, when a pipeline goes through the middle of a 10-acre tract, they don't even get the discount of being a farm anymore because they've lost their farming ability on their taxes, because you can't farm when you've got a pipeline going through the middle of your property. I am one of the fortunate ones that the pipeline isn't hitting my property, but I'm still feeling the effects of something that isn't even on my property line.
Right.
Which is, if it's, I know I'm not the only one, because, my neighbors have sinkholes popping up in the fields, and there are probably other people that don't even realize, because there is a lot of thickets and undeveloped areas around that they don't know what's going on. The farm they did the drilling on is 124 acres, and it's a lot of woodland. The higher part is used as farming, but there's also people will lease out 30 acres to go hunting on. Mm-hmm. And I know, they did the drilling right around when deer season was there, and I have friends that have leased the property for deer hunting. They didn't get any deer this year.
Yeah, so they're being deprived of the value of their land. They're being deprived of the fair use of their own land.
Right.
One thing that has to happen in order for this pipeline to go through is for the permitting to take place. LG&E has tried to do an end run around all the permitting. They should be getting permits from the Department of Water. They're not getting that. They should be getting permission from Department of Fish and Wildlife. They're not getting that. They also have to have eminent domain, which is supposed to be for a public use, but that's a private use. It's not a public use. It's not for public benefit. It's for private benefit.
Right. And the thing is, they're not even, they should not have even been able to drill because they didn't have the permit to drill. Right. They did it under false pretenses as far as, we're only taking core samples. Well, core sample, when you're looking at a pipeline that may be 6 feet deep, has nothing to do with something that's over 300 foot deep that you're drilling.
Well, let's pretend we're writing a headline, and couldn't we connect this with Governor Heartthrob? Andy Beshear, Governor Heartthrob, gets all this positive press because of the COVID epidemic, and he's doing okay. But in the meanwhile, his government is looking the other way, while LG&E and Jim Beam and all of their contractors and all of the cronies in Bullitt County that are benefiting from this, when is Governor Heartthrob going to require Department of Water and the Energy and Environmental Cabinet to enforce their permitting processes?
I don't know. And the thing is, it starts on the local level, and our local government is so corrupt.
Tell me more.
When you have a judge executive that used to be an executive for Jim Beam and is now making the decisions, and they didn't even produce where the pipeline was going until January, February of last year, and they were already buying up people's property prior to then, and they still don't have any permits to do it.
Yeah, so we're talking about Jerry Summers. Is that who?
Yes.
Yeah. And
And then when you look
he
at,
was on the payroll for Jim Beam, right?
right, he was one of their executives that was in charge of trying to get the pipeline through, and now he's our judge executive.
Yeah, and he claimed he didn't know anything about a pipeline. He said
Yeah,
publicly that he didn't know anything about a pipeline. Meanwhile, his name is all over documents related to the pipeline,
right.
according to
I
my
mean,
sources. And they were calling it Jerry Summers Pipeline.
and the thing is, they're not holding public meetings. Even before the COVID, they weren't holding public meetings. You couldn't get a meeting scheduled with the judge executive. If you tried to, he campaigned on transparency and being open to the community, and then all of a sudden he took his calendar down to where nobody could see what his calendar was. They, instead of holding the meetings in the evening where the most people could come, they started doing them during the day, because they don't want people there. They don't want people to know what they're doing.
So you've got lack of transparency. So you say Jerry Summers campaigned on a platform of transparency. He was going to be transparent. He was going to tell everybody what the government was really doing.
Yes.
And while he
And
was saying that, so when was he elected? 2019, 2018?
I think 2018. I think he's got 3 more years.
So
I
he
think
was campaigning on transparency, and we know that going back to that, the discussions between Jim Beam and LG&E about this pipeline go back to like 2015 or 2016.
right.
Four
I've heard
documents show that.
2015.
Yeah. Okay.
And I also heard, and these are, I haven't done the research to find out that, when Jim Beam said, no, we're not going to pay for it, we'll go someplace else to get the gas. And that's just, rumors that I've heard, but from sources that I trust, that have been in the middle of this since the beginning, since before 2019 when the pipeline was actually announced, because they were contacted because the pipeline's going through their property. And then LG&E came back to him and said, no, we'll do it. We'll just make taxpayers pay for it.
Right. So if that's true, let's talk about if that's true. Let's talk about maybe Jim Beam could have gotten its natural gas from another source, maybe up from Nashville or something. Maybe somebody else thought they were able to build a pipeline to reach Jim Beam, and then LG&E wouldn't be selling the natural gas that Jim Beam wants. So all of a sudden now LG&E is having to compete with another gas company. And if that's the case, then that tends to blow a hole in the whole idea of this being in the public interest. Because it's
Right.
not in the public interest if LG&E is just competing with some other outfit to make a profit.
Well, the other thing is if that outfit brings it up to Jim Beam, that also could open it up for other people to use that pipeline for personal use too. Mm-hmm. And that would defeat LG&E's monopoly that they have right now, because they can do whatever they want to, and there's no other way for people to go. Fortunate for me, I'm not into the LG&E thing. I don't have access to it, but I have propane. There are lots of competitors with propane. I can price, because I own my tank, I can price shop of who's going to give me the best deal. Where if you're with LG&E, you can't. There's one place that people can get their electricity. I'm on RECC, so LG&E is not even part of a bill that I pay, and it's not for anybody out here. And they're not,
so
they don't.
what you're saying is you could do without LG&E's damn pipeline.
Yes, I could. I could very much do without it, because it doesn't.
You could do without Jim Beam's pipeline. It's Jim Beam's pipeline. Nobody else is going to be hooking up to it.
Because it doesn't benefit any of us. That if they want to use eminent domain, it needs to be for public use. To me, this is a gateway for more industrial parks to come out and destroy or to take away more farmland, because people, so they're looking at whatever they get. You have major developers that are involved in buying up farmland that is going to be used for the pipeline. We just had a huge farm on the other side of the hill sell, and the pipeline's going through it.
Yeah, and another thing about that is they're paying a song.
Yeah.
I've talked to people that I've talked to people that are being deprived of a third of their farm, and it's a 100-acre farm or more, and LG&E is wanting to pay them $11,000. We're talking, how much is it per acre? I know it varies a lot, but are we talking about $10,000-$15,000 an acre, or is that, or some of it more than that? But anyway, a 100-acre farm, if you're being deprived of a third of it, that's worth a hell of a lot more than $11,000.
The farm next to me, which does not have a house or anything on it that would be livable, one farm is 124 acres, and they want $750,000.
Yeah, so we're talking, what is that, like 75,000 an acre or something like that? I don't know the math, but anyway.
Well, but then you look on the other, because a lot of that property is not usable for farmland, because it's,
yeah, not even usable for farmland. So if it were, it would cost more.
The farm on the other side of me has a house on it and a couple of barns. It's 19 acres, and they want $374,000 for it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a huge, but all of that land is eligible for cattle or farm, because he had cattle on it and could rotate the cattle through the fields, through the different
So that's
fields.
like 20,000 an acre, right? Approximately, in ballpark, like a $400,000 if it was 20 acres. That'd be, I think.
Right.
Anyway.
So when you're looking at that, and then you have somebody that can't use 30 acres of their 100-acre farm, and they're offering $11,000, that's a crock.
Oh yeah,
it is. Crock.
So, so that's two things. One is being deprived of the land that you bought, which might have a value more than just the market value.
Right. The land that I've got sinkholes popping up is field land, is land that I could plant trees on, but I don't trust it.
Right.
So it's property that I can't use to expand my farm, because I don't trust it. I don't trust that the ground will still be there.
So you're being deprived of the value of your farm. And for one thing, they don't have to, LG&E doesn't have to pay for your lawyers, and they don't have to pay for the lost value. They don't have to pay for the fact that you're losing revenues. They don't have to pay for the fact that you can't plant Christmas trees and on the property that has been in your family for at least a generation before you. So they don't have to pay for any of that. They're just being a big corporate bully and bulldozing people because they can, and it has nothing to do with the public interest.
And if these sinkholes keep doing it, am I going to lose part of my house to a sinkhole?
Right.
I have to worry about that. This house has been in my family. I was 3 months old when my parents moved out here. And they keep moving closer to my house. So, is it not only am I losing property that I could plant Christmas trees on, am I going to lose my garage and my, the basement and the structure of my house because of what's going on underground that I have no control over?
Right. Elizabeth, we've got about a minute left. What would you like to see happen here, and how can we help you?
I would like for the people who are involved in that, the government to look at the studies of what's going on to the surrounding land that, isn't directly affected, because I'm an indirect consequence of what LG&E has done. And, they need to take in consideration of what's going on and what's going to happen for the next generations. And they're not doing that. It doesn't seem like they care. So the government needs to get involved and stop the permits and stop all of that.
You mean Governor Heartthrob needs to take a minute off of his COVID stuff to make sure his government's actually doing their work?
Right. And the Attorney General needs to get involved to make sure that the other departments are doing their job.
Elizabeth Werkmeister Shafer, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining me today.
Okay. Thank you.